let's look at nothing. Alright, let's try again. Plot to Assassinate Hitler. That's what we were playing very recently. And first off, I want to say components on these Designer Edition SPI games, to me, are fantastic. Yeah, maybe it's not the bright colors, the glossy counters, or any of that, but frankly, I like them better. Lots and lots of nice charts, little holding boxes. That's all probably in the standard map, but the hard map, the nice box. It's a good combination for me. And just opening one of these up always brings me so much pleasure. Counters, I love my SPI counters. Nice color, nice, wonderful to clip. Really a fantastic experience. Now, clearly I didn't give a good playing through. This is kind of like when I played Twilight Struggle for the first time, which is, I think, still the only video that's out there. It doesn't mean I can't get a fair feel for the game, though. What I can't tell you necessarily is whether it's balanced, but I think there's a lot of luck in it, to the extent that it's quite possible that it will swing quite a bit. There's there's definitely a lot of strategy. Now, the strategy of the game seems to be about kind of controlling the access ways to vulnerable pieces and grabbing the pieces that you can and then using them. It's a very interesting system for me, and this whole Power Politics series by SPI was just such a fantastic treat always. It's so sad that they never got a lot of positive press, really. I mean, even in S&T, the reader surveys would be pretty clear. This ain't what the people who read the magazine wanted. They wanted more East Front World War II. You know, I mean, you put anything out East Front World War II, bang, way up there, 7, 8 rating. You put something out that's not a clear war game, or from a period that maybe they don't like, and it gets a negative rating. Now, this one has a particular problem, which is that it plays like a war game. Some of the games, well, really the only one in the series I can think that did very well was Russian Civil War, and that wasn't until after its time that it became quite as popular as it did. This reminds me a little bit of Russian Civil War and a little bit of Canadian Civil War, actually. Although because it has a hex map, it's different from either. It's got these, and Spies as well has this pile of chits that you're holding and trying to coordinate what you're doing with them. This one probably has the largest hand of chits that a player is going to hold out of the bunch. Unlike Canadian Civil War, though, they're not spread out on the board hiding under your units, which helps. But there were a couple of problems here with the physical component design side. So, for example, keeping track of the counters and where they are on the board, who matches with what loyalty markers you have, for example. That's really, really tough. And if you were, say, shaking up your set of counters so that the opponent could draw from, you'd have to keep sorting your counters. I was using dice for this, but that's kind of a pain because you have to count all the counters and then come up with the right modulo for that. These chit as event games or whatever, as a hand of cards almost, they always bother me for these reasons. They're very difficult to manage, and it's component-wise, that's a poor choice in the design. But, and I had a thought there, well, part of it, so the little control markers that go on top of, if you have sort of the wrong faction piece, so like if you have a Nazi piece and you're the app, or if you have an OKW and you're the SS, or no matter what, if you have a civilian, you have to have this little control marker on top, and that hides all the values and who it is that's wandering around. So that's a slight problem where I was considering whether or not maybe some kind of translucent chips would be the proper solution for that, at least for my playing. At the time this was made, printing cardboard chips was very, very cheap. Putting little plastic pieces in, especially at the smaller print runs that SPI put out, just wasn't an option. So, I'm not saying that you should have sold it with that, but I am thinking for my own purposes, something like that might be very, very cool. I'm not sure I want to invest the time and money into marking them up so that they, buying a set of little plastic chips and putting little marks on them so that I can tell who's which side. But I have some little clear plastic chips from things like High Frontier that would work there. What about the game itself? Well, people keep noting how it's telling a story. I catch that less than in most games, actually. It's harder for me to visualize what's going on. But you've got kind of this representation on a hex grid of the political reality in Nazi Berlin and the exterior areas. And people are able to throw their weight and their influence in your way so you can't do things. And that's being represented and played out in a way that's very, very much like a war game. And that's one of the reasons that I say this game is kind of problematic. Because even in today's market, the real grog nerds are going to look at it and say, that ain't a war game. And on the other hand, your more modern gamer who maybe was attracted to something like Russian Civil War and caused a reprint on that, isn't terribly thrilled with the hex and counter and lots and lots and lots of charts and tables to roll on. There's also a lot of luck in this one, which could be discouraging to people. And a few little technical details like the counters, for example, the fact that keeping track of what has moved and what hasn't is more difficult in this than in most war games. Two reasons for that. One is, first of all, in the normal play of it, you're moving one piece and then another. You're trying to push something so you can get sort of this exploitation type action, which is, I think, why people are talking about it as kind of armor-like. But it's not really, because most armor games have that kind of two-pulsed combat, at least that I've seen. I haven't seen many where you do one, you attack, you move another piece, you attack, you move another. I haven't seen many games of that nature, so I don't think of armor games that way. I usually think of armor games as being, movement combat, and then exploitation, movement combat, and maybe some kind of reserve in there or whatever. So this doesn't feel like that to me. This feels more chess-like in a way, because you're moving one piece at a time. But you move all your pieces and take their advantages. In some ways it reminds me of, not the CWB series, although they use the same concept, but the Napoleonic Brigade series, because the bayonet charge is more valuable in it, where you're continuously moving, a stack of pieces up, and then just overrunning the enemy with it. And that opens up a hole where you overrun another enemy, whatever. So it feels very much more like overrun combat games than what I'd say are more the traditional armor games. That's not a feel that makes your average non-war gamer happy. But again, like something like Tito, this just didn't hit that sweet spot for most war gamers. For me, I look at it and I say, this is a really interesting game. And I think that I could enjoy playing this a lot more than a lot of the other games that maybe I'm going to rate a little higher than this. I'm not going to rate this terribly high. I think I'm going to give it about a 6 because of some of the mechanical issues with it that I think cause problems, as well as, well, of all things, the thing that people comment about the story, I don't get the picture real well. If I stop and think about every move, I can get it. And you know, where I walked in and said, here's where Rommel said, get out, you know, because Himmler came to him with some kind of, hey, anybody been talking to you about this, you know? You can certainly focus on that, but there's not the kind of picture I'm used to in a war game of, you know, this kind of front that I can imagine well or whatever. It takes a little bit more effort than I'm used to in a game to try to picture what's going on or to bother to. Some of that may be because I'm using the camera, and some of it, a lot of it, is because it's kind of a fast-paced game. Fast-paced games tend to get rid of the story for me. And that's one thing about this. I suspect that playing this with someone in an opposed situation is going to be this incredibly, you know, tense and interactive experience, especially once the coup starts and each person's moving one piece and then the other person moves a piece, and they're just kind of maneuvering and directly opposing each other in a very chess-like sort of manner. And I think that's probably the golden point to the game. But right in the midst of that golden point, what do you have? You have this situation where you're going to have to do something to try to keep track of what pieces you move. And with two people moving fast and furious, it may well be too much. You know, in my solo game it was quite possible, but I think those kind of technical issues with the game are gonna make it kind of difficult and might frustrate the crap out of some people. Anyway, not sure where I'm going after this. I don't quite want to start another SPQR. I keep trying to put that off for whatever reason. I'm not sure what else to go with. I've been clipping Distant Seas because at least one of my viewers loves boat games so much, and I know I want to give it that to him. But yeah, I don't know what else to look at. Maybe Field Commander Alexander, although that has multiple scenarios. I don't know. Well, we'll see, because whatever it is what it is, right? All right.